The vault door should have taken hours. Instead, it opens in minutes, its steel ribs surrendering to a quiet, methodical violence. Inside, the air is stale, undisturbed for years, as if even oxygen had been instructed to keep secrets. A digital watch ticks toward 4:29 a.m. Tehran is still asleep. By sunrise, this room will be empty. And that is the problem, because rooms like this are never meant to be empty. The building sits in the Shorebad district, an unremarkable industrial zone on the southern edge of Tehran. No signage, no guards visible from the street. Its coordinates, 35.515 degrees north, 51.374 degrees east, mean nothing to the casual observer. But for years, signals intelligence had flagged the structure as anomalous. Satellite passes showed minimal daytime activity. Nighttime heat signatures spiked unpredictably. A warehouse that didn't behave like a warehouse. Inside, there are no weapons, no uranium, no centrifuges, only paper. By 2018, the global narrative around Iran's nuclear program had stabilized into a fragile consensus. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, signed in 2015, imposed strict limits on uranium enrichment, centrifuge counts, and stockpile levels. Inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency reported compliance. The crisis, at least publicly, had cooled. But intelligence agencies rarely trust equilibrium. Years earlier, fragments of information had surfaced. Whispers of a program known internally as Project Emptied. Western analysts believed it had been halted in 2003 under international pressure. Yet anomalies persisted. Procurement trails that didn't align with civilian energy needs. Design studies that hinted at weaponization. And most importantly, silence where there should have been closure. Silence in intelligence work is rarely empty. It is usually curated. The decision to act did not begin in 2018. It was the culmination of years of collection, analysis, and doubt. Within the Israeli intelligence community, the agency known as Mossad had built a profile of the Shorebad site not through a single breakthrough, but through accumulation, intercepted communications, human sources, pattern analysis. A picture formed slowly like a photograph in a chemical bath. A hidden archive, not a working facility but a memory bank. The institutional DNA of a nuclear weapons program, preserved in case it was ever needed again. And if such an archive existed, it would be more dangerous than any single centrifuge. Because knowledge does not decay. It waits. The operation that followed would later be described, in sanitized terms, as a retrieval. In reality, it was closer to a surgical intrusion into one of the most secure states in the world. Iran's counterintelligence apparatus, shaped by decades of isolation and infiltration attempts, was not designed to be easily bypassed, which is why the plan relied not on force but on precision. The team entered Tehran in fragments, separate routes, separate covers, converging only in the final hours. Their equipment had been prepositioned, vehicles staged, exit routes mapped down to the minute. They were not there to explore. They were there to extract. Time was the central variable. Iranian security protocols dictated that the warehouse would be checked at 7 o'clock. That gave them less than 6 hours from entry to disappearance. Within that window, they would need to breach multiple safes, identify high-value material, and remove it without triggering alarms. Every minute was already spent on paper. Inside the vault, rows of black safes line the walls, industrial grade, each weighing hundreds of kilograms. They are not designed for quick access. They are designed for permanence, for resistance. The first safe takes longer than expected, not because of technical difficulty, but because of uncertainty. There is always a moment in operations like this where theory confronts reality. Tools meet metal. Assumptions are tested. If the intelligence is wrong, if the archive isn't here, then every second spent inside is a liability. The door cracks open. Inside, binders. Thousands of pages, meticulously organized. Diagrams, reports, handwritten notes. The language is technical, precise. It is not propaganda. It is engineering. The second safe confirms it, and the third removes all doubt. This is not an archive of intentions. It is an archive of capability. The team accelerates. Thermal cutting tools slice through steel with controlled intensity, minimizing noise and heat signatures. Documents are triaged in real time, prioritized based on markings, density of information, and relevance to known program elements. Digital media, CDs, hard drives are bagged separately. They cannot take everything, so they take what matters most. By 5:45 a.m., the warehouse floor is littered with open safes. The air smells of metal and insulation. The silence is broken only by the low hum of equipment and the occasional snap of cooling steel. Outside, Tehran begins to stir. Traffic increases. The city transitions from night to day with the slow inevitability of routine. And routine is the enemy of covert operations. The more people move, the harder it is to remain invisible. At 6:20 a.m., the team exits. Not in a rush, but with calculated urgency. Vehicles disperse along pre-planned routes, merging into the morning flow. By the time the warehouse is due for inspection, the archive is already in motion, fragmented, concealed, leaving the country piece by piece. What remains behind is absence. And absence in this context is a signal. When Iranian authorities discover the breach, the response is immediate and contained. Internal investigations, security reviews, a search for the point of failure. But the damage is not local. It is epistemological. Because the archive is no longer theirs.in Tel Aviv, analysts begin the process of reconstruction. Thousands of documents are cataloged, translated, cross-referenced. What emerges is not a single revelation, but a pattern, a continuity between past ambitions and present capabilities. Project Ahmad, it turns out, was far more advanced than previously assessed. Detailed designs for nuclear warheads, plans for integrating them onto ballistic missiles, experimental data on high-explosive triggers, the kind of information that does not belong to a purely civilian program. More importantly, the documents suggest that while the program may have been officially halted, its knowledge base was preserved with extraordinary care. This was not abandonment.it was archiving. The implications ripple outward. For the United States, the archive provides a new evidentiary foundation at a critical political moment. Debates over the future of the nuclear agreement intensify. Within months, Washington announces its withdrawal from the deal, citing concerns that extend beyond current compliance to historical intent and future potential. For Europe, the reaction is more cautious. The agreement, flawed as it may be, is seen as a stabilizing mechanism. The archive complicates the narrative, but does not resolve it. Diplomacy, after all, operates on the management of risk, not its elimination. For Iran, the theft is both a security failure and a strategic exposure. The existence of the archive confirms what had long been denied, that weaponization research had reached significant depth. At the same time, the loss of that archive introduces uncertainty into their own system. Knowledge dispersed, but no longer fully controlled. And for Mossad, the operation becomes a case study in modern intelligence tradecraft. Not because of its audacity, but because of its focus.in an era dominated by cyber operations, satellite surveillance, and remote sensing. This was a reminder of something older. That sometimes the most valuable intelligence is still physical, tangible, locked in a room that can only be opened by someone willing to stand inside it. Yet even as the details become public through briefings, press conferences, carefully curated disclosures, the operation retains a core ambiguity. What exactly was the endgame? Was the goal to expose past deception? To influence policy? To delay or disrupt a potential future program? Or was it simply to know, to reduce uncertainty in a domain where uncertainty carries existential weight? Intelligence operations rarely have singular purposes. They operate in layers. The Iran nuclear archive heist sits at the intersection of those layers. a tactical success with strategic consequences, a moment where clandestine action intersects with global policy. But it also raises a quieter question. If a program can be dismantled physically, yet preserved intellectually, has it ever truly ended? The documents taken from Shorabad do not enrich uranium. They do not assemble warheads. They do not launch missiles. They are inert in the strictest sense. And yet, they represent something far more persistent. Capability, once achieved, does not vanish. It is encoded in diagrams, in equations, in the minds of those who worked on it. An archive is not just a record of the past. It is a blueprint for the future, which is why, in the final analysis, the heist is not just about what was stolen. It is about what was revealed, that beneath the surface of compliance and agreements, there exists a parallel reality, one where states hedge, preserve, and prepare, not necessarily for immediate action, but for the possibility of it. Possibility that may never materialize, or one that might, because somewhere in another unmarked building under another layer of secrecy, there may already be a new archive, smaller, better hidden, waiting for a moment when it is no longer necessary to hide. And if that moment comes, it will not begin with an announcement. It will begin, as these things often do, in silence.